Hi, I'm Jake, 29, the allegedly selfish son who apparently ruined my parents' financial plan just by having boundaries. Let me walk you into the moment everything started to unravel. The night my parents tried to turn me into my sister's free nanny and accidentally evicted their own cash cow. I'd been living in my parents' rental condo for 4 years. 2 bedrooms, decent neighborhood, a kitchen last updated during the Clinton administration, but still a solid place. They gave me a family discount of $800 a month, a blessing considering market rent was double that. I treated the place like my own. Fixed things myself. Replaced the shower head when the old one sputtered its last sad dribble. Tightened cabinet hinges. Even took care of the lawn area out front because the HOA guy always looked on the edge of a nervous breakdown. My parents loved having a reliable tenant. I loved saving money. Everyone was happy. And then Bailey had a baby. Bailey is my younger sister by 5 years, and she's been the family golden child since birth. The girl could set the house on fire and my parents would blame the match manufacturer. Meanwhile, if I inhaled too loudly, Dad would sit me down for a serious talk about responsibility. Bailey got pregnant at 26 after dating her boyfriend, Danny, for about as long as it takes bread to mold. They were both working unstable retail jobs and living paycheck to paycheck, but my parents? They practically threw a parade. First grandchild. Dreams coming true. Time to spoil Bailey rotten, again. They paid for everything. Her new apartment, her furniture, her maternity clothes, the baby shower, the nursery, everything short of the child itself. Then Sophie was born, and Bailey immediately discovered motherhood wasn't an Instagram filter. Sleepless nights, crying bottles, diapers, shocking, I know. So she did what she always does. She handed the responsibility to Mom and Dad like it was a library book someone else could return. But here's the twist. Now that Mom and Dad were drowning in helping Bailey, they suddenly remembered I existed. And they had a plan. A truly stupid, self-destructing plan. It was a Sunday dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the faint smell of impending doom. Bailey was there with Sophie, who cried on a loop like a tiny alarm system nobody knew how to disable. Bailey instantly shoved her into Mom's arms the moment she walked in. Classic. After dinner, Dad gave the signal, the old, "Jake, can we talk in the office?" The family court chambers. Perfect. I walked in to find all 3 of them waiting. Mom on the armchair like a disappointed judge. Dad behind his desk, elbows planted like he was negotiating a hostage situation. Bailey leaning against the wall scrolling her phone, because obviously her time was the most valuable. Dad cleared his throat. "Son, your mother and I have been talking." My stomach dropped. Nothing good ever follows those words. And then the pitch came. Since I work from home 2 days a week, I should start watching Sophie during business hours. Every Tuesday and Thursday. 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., 16 hours a week. Just until Bailey gets settled, Mom added. Meaning forever. I stared at them. You know I'm in meetings all day, right? With clients, inspectors, contractors. I can't have a crying baby on camera. Dad waved that off like noise complaints at a fireworks show. You'll manage. Lots of parents work from home with kids. Parents who chose to have kids. I snapped. I didn't sign up for this. Then came the true bomb. Dad folded his hands like he was very proud of this line. Well, Jake, your rent has been discounted for years. We think it's time to increase it to market rate. $2,200. I blinked. $2,200? Mom chimed in sweetly. Of course, honey, if you help Bailey with Sophie twice a week, we'll keep it at $800. Ah. There it was. Not help. Not family. A shakedown. Do unpaid childcare. Or get evicted financially. And Bailey? She just shrugged and said, Sophie's really easy. She mostly naps. Bull. Absolute bull. That baby screamed like a siren with unlimited batteries. I felt the anger rise up my neck like a thermometer in a cartoon. "You're threatening to triple my rent," I said slowly. "If I don't become a free nanny." Dad put on his authoritative voice. "That's one way to look at it." "Yeah," I said. "The correct way." I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate. I just said, "No," and I walked out. That was the moment everything changed, for them, not for me. Because the rent wasn't the only thing about to increase. The consequences were too. When I got home that night, I sat on my couch in total silence. The kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat, and also the faint sound of your entire childhood snapping in half. My parents had basically looked me in the eyes and said, "Work for us for free, or we'll financially chokeslam you." And the wildest part? They thought I'd say yes. They genuinely thought their 29-year-old son, who had a real job, a real life, and real responsibilities, would happily become a part-time nanny because Bailey didn't feel like paying for daycare. I replayed the conversation over and over. Dad with his business-tone threats. Mom acting like she was doing me a spiritual favor. Bailey, lounging like a queen whose peasants were disappointing her. I realized something important. It wasn't desperation. It was expectation. They fully expected I would sacrifice my job because Bailey didn't plan ahead. Danny floated through life like a leaf in the wind. And I had the audacity to be the responsible one. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's face when he said, "Your rent will be $2,200 starting August." It wasn't even subtle. It was blackmail with a smile. So the next morning, instead of going into martyr mode like they hoped, I opened my laptop and searched. "One-bedroom apartment near me." The results were depressing. Rent prices looked like someone had typed them with trembling hands after losing a bet. Places that used to be $900 were now $1,600. Places that were $1,600 were now $2,200. Places below $1,400 came with quirks, like historic charm, mold, or urban ambience, gunshots. Still, I spent my lunch break driving around touring rentals. Some were nice. Some were horrifying. One had a smell so mysterious I still think about it at night. But I found one, a clean, renovated one-bedroom about 20 minutes further from work. Not huge, not fancy, but honest. No strings. No threats. No Bailey. $1,400 a month. It wasn't the dream. But it was achievable. And more importantly, it was mine. 3 days later, after more tours, math, and pacing around my living room like a divorce detective, I signed the lease. Move-in date: August 1st. The same day my rent at the condo was set to triple. Chef's kiss timing. That evening, I poured a drink, sat on my couch, and felt something I hadn't felt since college. Control. Nobody owned me. Nobody dictated my terms. Nobody pulled financial puppet strings. I was free. Then my phone buzzed. Dad. I let it ring out. Buzz. Mom. Ignored. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Bailey texting. "So are you helping or not?" I ignored that too. 15 minutes later, Dad called again. I picked up this time just to rip the Band-Aid off. "Have you thought about our offer?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm moving out." Silence. Deep, offended, disappointed silence. My family's specialty. "You're moving out?" he said finally. "That's what I said. We weren't serious about raising the rent that high," Mom said in the background. Which was hilarious, because yes, they absolutely were. "Well," I said calmly, "I was serious about not being manipulated." Mom gasped like I'd slapped her with a Bible. Dad tried a new angle. "Jake, be reasonable. This arrangement helps everyone." "It doesn't help me," I said. "And I'm done being the only one expected to sacrifice." Bailey chimed in through speakerphone, because of course she was listening. "OMG, you're being so selfish." she snapped. It's 2 days a week. Grow up. And that was the moment something inside me clicked. If I said yes, I asked, would you ever take responsibility for your own child? She hung up. Classic. Dad sighed. We'll talk about this when you calm down. No, I said. We won't. And I ended the call. That was the last time we spoke civilly. The next 2 weeks were a blur of packing boxes, Craigslist furniture sales, and aggressively bubble-wrapping things I didn't even like. But through all the chaos, one feeling kept humming in the background. Relief. Real, deep, liberating relief. Because I wasn't just moving apartments. I was moving out of the family role I had been shoved into my whole life. The responsible one. The fixer. The backbone. The automatic helper. The unpaid labor. That version of Jake was done. But the consequences of my decision? Oh, those were just warming up. And my parents, the same ones who thought they could raise my rent like adjusting the thermostat, were about to learn what happens when you kick out the one person holding your financial scaffolding together. Moving day came faster than expected. Kevin showed up with coffees, a rented U-Haul, and the kind of chaotic energy only a best friend who has watched your family drama for a decade can bring. Ready to break free from the cult of Bailey? He asked. As ready as I'll ever be. We loaded boxes for hours. By noon, the condo was echoing, empty walls, bare floors, and the faint smell of 4 years of my life being wiped clean. At 3 p.m., sweaty and exhausted, I drove back to my parents' house to drop off the keys. I knocked. Dad opened the door. He looked bad. Stress bad. Dark circles. Jaw tight. The expression of a man who realized his golden goose has officially applied for relocation. You actually did it, he said, staring at the keys in my hand like they were radioactive. I told you I would. He exhaled hard, one of those disappointed sighs fathers practice in the mirror. Your mother is devastated, he said. She's devastated her plan didn't work, I corrected. He flinched, just slightly. Jake, we were trying to help Bailey. No, I said. You were trying to help Bailey by sacrificing me. That's different. Silence. Even the house seemed to freeze. Then Bailey appeared behind him. Still holding Sophie. Still looking annoyed that my existence was inconveniencing her aesthetic. You really couldn't do this one thing for me? She asked. One thing? I repeated. 16 hours a week for free while risking my job? Her face twisted. Whatever. You've always been selfish. I laughed. I actually laughed. Bailey, I spent my entire childhood cleaning up your messes. You spent yours making them. Dad stepped forward, trying to regain control of the moment. We already lowered the price, he said. We're willing to reduce the rent to $1,200 if you stay. There it was. The panic. The realization. The sudden understanding that they needed me more than I ever needed them. I signed a lease. I said. I'm moving today. You're throwing away a good thing, Dad said. No. I'm walking away from a bad one. I put the keys on the table, turned, and walked out of the house I grew up in, for what would end up being the last time in months. On August 1st, I officially moved into my new apartment. Smaller kitchen. Older building. Slightly creaky floors. But it was peaceful. No one could raise my rent to force me into babysitting. No one could guilt-trip me into sacrificing my job. No one could weaponize family like a coupon code for free labor. Kevin helped me set up my desk in the corner by the window. We ordered pizza. We drank bad beer. We sat on the floor laughing about how my life had turned into an off-brand Netflix drama. For the first time in a long time, I felt good. Really good. But while I was settling into independence, my parents were about to hit a turning point of their own. I didn't know this part yet. It would take weeks before the full story reached me. But on that very same day, the day they thought they'd secured Bailey a free nanny or a new stream of rent income, They made their first mistake. They listed the condo for $2,200 online. And the world answered with a big, fat, echoing nope. 10 days. 0 inquiries. 2 weeks. 1 inquiry, from someone with 3 dogs and a boa constrictor. By week 4, Mom was panicking. By week 6, Dad was crunching numbers. By week 8, they realized something horrifying. They had overplayed their hand. The cash cow had walked out of the barn. The udder was closed for business. The milk had evaporated. And the mortgage? Still very, very real. But for now, all I knew was that I had a new apartment, a new sense of peace, and the first quiet night's sleep I'd had in months. I had no idea that the biggest fallout was barreling toward them, and that this turning point was only the beginning. My parents went silent for exactly 5 days. 5 days of no calls. No texts. No guilt-laced voicemails about how Bailey was struggling, or how Sophie needed family. It was suspiciously quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens right before a hurricane or a family group chat meltdown. On day 6 I learned why. I was sitting at my tiny new kitchen table, eating leftover pizza and trying to decide if I should buy a rug or embrace the charming aesthetic known as bachelor on a budget, when my Aunt Lisa called. Now, Aunt Lisa doesn't call unless someone died. Someone fired a cannon at Thanksgiving. Someone did something incredibly stupid. This time it was door number 3. The moment I picked up, she launched in. Your parents are losing their minds. I blinked. What else is new? No, Jake. I mean really losing their minds. She sounded almost gleeful, like she'd finally been validated after watching my family's favoritism Olympics for decades. What happened? I asked. Oh, honey, she said, savoring every word. They can't find anyone willing to rent the condo for $2,200. I leaned back in my chair. Well, yeah? They dropped it to $1,900. She continued. Still nothing. I raised an eyebrow. Did they think flooring from the Clinton administration was a selling point? You'd think, she said. But apparently today's young couples don't consider off-white carpet with mystery stains vintage chic. I snorted into my pizza. And, she added, voice dropping, your father called your uncle yesterday to borrow money. I almost choked. Wait. Borrow money? Dad? The same one who gave you a lecture about financial responsibility when you needed help with textbooks. Yes. That one. I leaned forward. What did Uncle Jeff say? He said, and I quote, maybe you shouldn't have tried to extort your own kid for childcare. I dropped my forehead onto the table and laughed until my stomach hurt. I could practically hear my father's blood pressure spike from across town. Aunt Lisa continued, clearly enjoying being the bearer of chaos updates. They're panicking, Jake. They thought they'd have a new tenant by August. It's nearly September. Mortgage is due. Insurance is due. Property taxes are due. The condo's empty. The market's down. And your mother is acting like someone stole her pearls and slapped her with them. This was better than reality TV. I almost felt bad. Almost. 2 days later, the group chat woke up. Mom. Jake, please call us. Dad. We need to discuss the condo situation. Mom. This isn't like you. You're being stubborn and unreasonable. Bailey. Are you really going to watch our parents drown because you're holding a grudge? I rolled my eyes so hard I saw my brain. Me, finally typing back. You raised my rent from $800 to $2,200 because I wouldn't become your free nanny. Mom replied instantly, as if she'd been waiting with the phone in both hands. Mom. We already apologized. They had not. Me. You never apologized. You called me dramatic. Then you tried to gaslight me into believing it wasn't an ultimatum. Dad. It wasn't an ultimatum. It was a practical solution. Me. A solution that involved tripling my rent unless I worked for free. Silence. You could practically see the typing bubbles trembling in denial. Then Bailey jumped in. Bailey, you're seriously going to let Mom and Dad struggle financially because you refuse to help with Sophie 2 days a week? Me. Yes. Bailey. That's disgusting. Me. So is exploiting your family, Bail, but here we are. Then Dad broke the silence with what might be the funniest message I've ever received. Dad. Fine. Can you help us find a renter? I stared at that message for a full 10 seconds. They had tried to force me into childcare by threatening to raise my rent. They had assumed I would panic, fold, and come crawling back with gratitude. Instead, their financially stable adult son simply wasn't financially trapped. And now their master plan was collapsing like a thrift store folding chair. I typed back. Me. No. But good luck. Then I put my phone down and went back to my pizza. By mid-September, things got worse for them. A lot worse. They'd dropped the condo to $1,800. Then $1,700. Then $1,600. Still no takers. Meanwhile, Bailey discovered that subsidized daycare required, predictable schedules and showing up on time. Danny had finally gotten a warehouse job, but he hated waking up early. Their free grandparent babysitting rotation was burning out fast. The whole ecosystem of dysfunction was cracking. And I hadn't done a thing except leave. That was the real turning point. Me walking away had revealed every crack they'd been plastering over with denial, privilege, and the kind of parenting philosophy known as let the older sibling handle it. They didn't expect the ecosystem to collapse without me. But it did. And the next collapse was coming, the biggest one yet. Because something was brewing behind the scenes. And it was about to hit their house like a financial earthquake. The financial earthquake hit on a random Tuesday morning. I was halfway through a Zoom call with a contractor arguing about why the electrical plans did not, in fact, include Vibes lighting, when my phone lit up with a barrage of texts from Mom. Normally, I ignore mid-meeting texts, but she sent 7 in a row, which is her version of screaming. Mom. Call me now. Emergency. Please. It's about the condo. Jake, please. I excused myself from the meeting, muted my mic, turned off my camera, and stepped into my tiny hallway. When I called her, she picked up on the first ring with the energy of someone who'd just run through an airport. She didn't even say hello. They raised the mortgage. I blinked. What? The bank adjusted our mortgage, she repeated, frantic. We're variable rate, Jake. We thought we had locked in before the increase, but something happened with the refinance paperwork and I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mom, how much did it go up? Dead silence. Then a whisper, like she was confessing a murder. $400 a month. I had to sit down. So, I said slowly, you now have the mortgage, the property taxes, the HOA fees, the insurance, and no rent coming in. Mom sniffled. It's your father's fault. He filled out the form wrong. I told him to double-check it. But no one listens to me. Dad shouted in the background. It was a simple mistake. Mom shot back. Well, your simple mistake cost US $5,000 a year. I almost choked trying not to laugh. The arguing continued until Mom hissed at him to quiet down like I couldn't hear everything crystal clear. She returned to the phone. Jake, she said, switching to her tragic heroine voice, we need your help. Ah. There it was. The entire purpose of the emergency call. What kind of help? I asked, already knowing the answer. We need a renter immediately. Someone reliable. Someone we trust. Someone who won't complain about the condition of the condo. A beat. You. I smiled, the slow, satisfied kind. No. She sputtered. Don't be ridiculous. This is your home. No. I corrected. It was a home. Before you tried to weaponize it against me. Dad got on the phone, voice tight. We're willing to negotiate the rent. I leaned back against the wall. Okay, I said casually. What's the offer? Dad inhaled like he was about to swallow his pride whole. We'll go back to $800. I laughed so loud the contractor on my muted Zoom call probably heard me through the walls. Dad, I said, wiping my eyes, you asked for $2,200 a month 2 months ago. That was before the market adjusted, he muttered. And before, I said, you tried to turn me into Bailey's free nanny. Mom groaned like she'd been shot. Oh my God, Jake, are you ever going to let that go? No, I said. I'm not. Dad snapped. We did what we had to do to help your sister. And I did what I had to do to help myself. Silence. The heavy, awkward, thick kind that only comes from someone realizing they've lost every inch of leverage they thought they had. Dad tried again, this time in that fake calm tone he used when disciplining me as a teenager. Jake. The rent is back to $800. You can move back in any time. No thanks. What do you mean, no thanks? Mom demanded. I mean, I said, I'm not coming back. But we lowered the rent. Dad said, sounding genuinely confused. You didn't lower the rent. I corrected. You restored it after you failed to extort me. Another silence. Then Mom tried the nuclear guilt. Do you want us to lose the condo? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Mom, that's not my responsibility. It never was. Dad's voice hardened. So that's it? You're abandoning your family when we need you most? No, I said. I stopped letting you financially manipulate me. There's a difference. And then, it happened. The line that proved they still didn't understand anything. You're supposed to help us, Dad said. You're our son. Exactly, I replied. Your son. Not your employee. Not your tenant hostage. Not your free babysitter. Mom's voice cracked. What are we supposed to do? I shrugged even though they couldn't see it. Figure it out. Like adults. And then I hung up. I walked back to my desk, unmuted myself, and rejoined the meeting right as the contractor said, So, about those light fixtures? I smiled. Let's go with standard. I'm not in the mood for surprises today. The next week was pure second-hand comedy. Aunt Lisa kept me updated like she was running a sports commentary. They dropped the price to $1,550. Still no takers. They're considering paying someone to stage the condo. They're fighting daily. Your mom called your dad a reckless amateur landlord. They asked Bailey to chip in for the mortgage. She laughed. They asked Danny? He said, and I quote, I ain't subsidizing your bad business decisions. Every update was more unbelievable than the last. My parents, who had treated me like an unlimited resource, were realizing they had nothing to bargain with. No leverage. No discounts to threaten. No son to pressure. They'd broken the system that depended entirely on me. And for once, the consequences were landing squarely on their doorstep instead of mine. But the fallout? Oh, it wasn't done. Because Part 6. That's when they make their desperate move. And it's wild. 3 weeks after the mortgage meltdown, my parents finally reached the desperation stage of landlord panic, the stage where good judgment dies and unhinged decisions are born. It started at 6:14 a.m. My phone buzzed nonstop until I woke up. 7 missed calls from Mom. 4 from Dad. 2 from Bailey. That combination meant only one thing. Catastrophic chaos with a side of delusion. I called Dad back first, because he handles emergencies with slightly less hysteria than Mom. He answered like he'd been waiting beside the phone with binoculars. Jake! Finally! We need you to come to the condo immediately. For what? You'll see when you get here. No, I said. Tell me now. And then, in the most dramatic, doom-soaked voice known to fathers everywhere, he said, There's water. Everywhere. I sat up. What do you mean, everywhere? It's flooding. Flooding. From a place they refused to rent for 8 months. From a place they wanted me to pay $2,200 for. From a place they once bragged never had issues because Jake always fixed everything himself. Beautiful irony. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and drove over. When I walked into the building hallway, I could smell it already, that wet drywall, mildew coming odor of a plumbing disaster. Then I reached the door. Dad was standing outside the unit with the expression of a man who just watched his life savings burst like a water balloon. Mom was pacing. Like full Olympic speed pacing. Bailey was holding Sophie and crying like someone had canceled Christmas. I stepped inside. And yeah, the place was a swamp. Water had pooled across the entire living room. The carpet was soaked. A visible drip came from the ceiling light fixture like it was trying out for a horror movie. The kitchen cabinet under the sink had collapsed inward, was swollen and warped. A pipe had burst clean through. I scanned the room. So, I said, when exactly did this start? Dad cleared his throat. Last night. Around midnight. I stared at him. And when did you notice? Around midnight. And when did you call a plumber? He and Mom exchanged a look, the kind parents exchange right before they confess they did something catastrophically, breathtakingly stupid. Mom finally said, "We thought we could fix it ourselves." I blinked. You what? It didn't look that bad at first. She insisted. Your father tightened some things. Tightened what? The thing under the sink. I stared at the ruined cabinet. The thing under the sink is the pipe, Mom. She waved her hand dramatically. Well, clearly it didn't work. Dad tried to regain dignity. It was manageable when we went to bed. Then we woke up at 3 and the floor was shimmering. Shimmering. Like it was a magical fairyland instead of a disaster. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Did you turn off the water main? Mom blinked. Where is that? I inhaled deeply through my mouth because breathing through my nose was now a health hazard. Did you call the building maintenance? They said it's not their responsibility. Dad snapped. It's a plumbing fixture inside the unit. Did you call any emergency plumber? We were waiting to see if you'd come, Mom said. And that was when I realized the truth. They still thought I would swoop in and save them. Fix everything. Handle everything. Absorb the consequences they created. Because that's what I'd always done. Not today. No, sir. Not after the rent extortion, the manipulation, the Bailey babysitting scheme, the guilt tactics, none of it. I crossed my arms. You want help? I said calmly. Okay. Here's my help. All three of them froze. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed a plumber. A very expensive, very professional, very certified plumber. The kind that charges $400 just to say hello. They arrived within 45 minutes. Dad looked relieved. Mom actually smiled. Bailey exhaled like I'd just saved her from drowning. Then the plumber gave the quote. And Dad turned gray. $100? He sputtered. Just to fix the pipe? The plumber explained the real issue. The water had leaked into the subfloor. The drywall behind the cabinets was wet. Mold risk. Half the cabinet needed replacing. And that's when Dad tried it. Well, Jake fixes things. He repaired the garbage disposal last year. The plumber and I exchanged the same look. Sir, be serious. I paid the plumber's inspection fee myself, $100, just so my parents couldn't accuse me of abandoning them entirely. Then I turned to Dad, Mom, and Bailey. You need to call your insurance, I said. This is going to be thousands. Mom looked horrified. Our deductible is $2,500. Yeah, I said. That's what happens when you're landlords. Bailey muttered. This is all because you moved out. I turned slowly. Excuse me? She stammered. I mean, if you were still living here, you would have noticed the leak earlier. Ah. There it was. The delusion. No, I said, my voice flat. This is because Mom and Dad refused to hire a plumber last night, tried to fix a burst pipe with a wrench, and let the unit flood for 3 hours. Dad bristled. You don't have to be rude. I smiled. Actually, after being threatened with $2,200 rent unless I became Bailey's free nanny, I think I'm still being pretty polite. Bailey went quiet. Mom looked away. Dad clenched his jaw. The silence was thick and ugly. Then Mom finally said, in a tiny voice, We can't afford this. And that was the moment, the exact moment, when the guilt they'd been shoveling onto me for months evaporated. Because for the first time ever, they were facing the consequences themselves. Not me. Not the family punching bag. Not the built-in solution. Not the convenient fixer. Them. The people who created the mess. I nodded. I'm sorry you're in a tough spot, I said honestly. But this is yours to handle. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad looked like he aged 10 years. Bailey whispered, We messed up, didn't we? I didn't let her off the hook. You all did. And then I left. Walked out. Didn't look back. As the door closed behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. I didn't hear from anyone for 3 days. 3 glorious, peaceful, silent days. No guilt. No ultimatums. No family emergency, disguised as manipulation. Just me, my coffee, my job, and the joy of knowing I wasn't mopping up anyone else's self-inflicted disasters. Then, on Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. Dad. Not calling, texting. Which meant he was either A. Being cautious. B. Ashamed. C. Preparing to say something he didn't want Mom to overhear. The text said, Jake. Dinner? Just you and me. I stared at it. There were 2 possibilities. He wanted to lecture me. Or he wanted to say something he couldn't say with Mom around. Either way, this was rare. Dad never asked for one-on-one anything. He only did family talks, which were usually interventions against me, but with potato salad. I replied. Where? He chose a diner halfway between our houses. Neutral ground. Excellent choice. When I walked in, he was already there with 2 coffees and the tired posture of a man who'd been beaten down by life, plumbing, and consequences. He didn't even wait for me to sit. Jake, he said, rubbing his temples, I owe you an apology. Not what I expected. Not even close. I slowly Saturday. I owe you a real apology, he corrected. Not a fake one wrapped in excuses. I waited. He took a deep breath and spoke in that slow, measured voice he only used when talking about serious things, job losses, funerals, taxes. What we did, he said. Threatening to raise your rent unless you watched Sophie, that was wrong. Manipulative. Dishonest. He winced at his own words. It wasn't parenting. It wasn't good judgment. It wasn't even good business. It was desperation disguised as logic. I didn't say anything. I let him talk. You've always been the reliable one. The adult in the room. The one who didn't ask for help. And somewhere along the way, his voice cracked. We started counting on that too much. He looked up at me, eyes tired. We treated you like a safety net instead of a son. That hit me harder than I expected. And when Bailey had Sophie, he continued, we panicked. We were so scared she wouldn't manage, so scared she'd fall apart, that we tried to force stability by placing everything on you. He shook his head at himself. Parenting with fear makes you do stupid things. And we did something incredibly stupid. I watched him carefully. Dad didn't do emotional honesty. He did stoicism, lectures, and lawn care philosophy. But this was new. He pushed the coffee toward me. We didn't think through what we were asking of you, he said. We just assumed you'd help because you always help. We never asked whether it was fair. It wasn't, I said quietly. I know, he replied. There was a long pause. He sipped his coffee. Then he added, "And I didn't want you to move out. Not just because of the rent. Because I liked having you close." That one actually caught in my throat. He continued, voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "You grew up. You built a life. You became responsible. And instead of being proud the right way, we turned that into expectation. Into entitlement. And that's on us." I didn't interrupt. Didn't soften it. Didn't save him from the discomfort. He needed to feel this. Finally he said, "I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking you to help Bailey. I'm just asking you to forgive us." Silence. The diner's hum filled the space between us. A waitress dropped fries at another table. A kid laughed in a booth. Someone played a pinball machine in the corner. I took a breath. "I appreciate the apology," I said. "Really. And I believe you. But things need to change before we pretend this never happened." He nodded, accepting that. "What do you need from us?" he asked. And that's when I realized he genuinely meant it. So I told him. 1. No more ultimatums. Ever. 2. No more financial strings disguised as favors. 3. No more expecting me to clean up Bailey's life choices. 4. Accountability, for everyone. Bailey included. 5. Respect. Just basic respect. He nodded slowly, like each rule was a heavy stone being placed somewhere important inside him. "I can do that," he said. "Your mother may take time. But she'll get there." That was fair. He cleared his throat and changed the subject. "We finally got the insurance claim approved." "Good," I said. "It's expensive," he added. "Yeah. Bursting pipes usually are." "We shouldn't have waited," he said quietly. "No," I agreed. "You shouldn't have." He took a long sip of coffee, stared at the cup, and finally muttered, "There's one more thing." I raised an eyebrow. He exhaled hard. "Bailey broke down yesterday. Completely. Said she wanted to come clean to you. She feels ashamed." I frowned. "Bailey? Ashamed?" That was new. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated. And then he said the sentence that changed everything. "She told us she planned the rent ultimatum weeks before we brought it up. It was her idea. She pushed your mother. She talked me into it." I sat back. "Hard. Bailey did?" Dad nodded. "She wanted you trapped. She wanted guaranteed childcare. She said you owed her for being the stable one. She said you didn't have a family of your own, so you should help hers." I stared at him. A mix of anger, betrayal, and that familiar ache of unfairness flared up inside me. Dad swallowed. "She used us, Jake. Manipulated us. And we let her." For a long time, I didn't speak. Then I said, "I'm not surprised." Dad closed his eyes like he'd been hoping I wouldn't say that. "She wants to apologize to you," he said. "A real apology. Not a guilt trip. She's been crying for days." I didn't react. He added, "She finally understands what she did." I looked at him. Really looked. Dad. Proud, stubborn, flawed human dad. And for the first time in months, I saw the old version of him, the one who tried, even when he messed up. "Let's finish our coffee," I said. He smiled, an exhausted, grateful smile. And we did. That's the final conversation. The real reckoning. The apology I never thought I'd hear. And the choice I had to make afterward.